Hey guys, this is Ronald, and before we start this video off, I just want to let you know that Frank Sheldon, the face behind G-Man since Half-Life 2, opened up a Twitter account just for you guys, so you can follow him there and stay in touch with him to keep the interaction up. He wants to talk to you guys, so please follow him at Frank Sheldon 1. Thank you, and let's begin.
Welcome to the VŌC Podcast.
Hello guys, I hope all of you are doing well out there, and welcome to a brand new episode of the VŌC Podcast. In today's episode, I'll be interviewing writer Frank Sheldon, who's been the face model of the G-Man since Half-Life 2. That's back in 2004. Well, welcome Frank, thank you so much for coming on and joining me for this chat about Half-Life. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well, and thank you for asking, and thank you for having me here.
Well, thank you for being interested.
Well, we'll see.
Well, yeah, we'll see. And we have our first question over here from White Red Dragons is his username. How did you get in touch with Valve, actually? Or how did you get the job?
Well, I had a friend. I guess I should say when I first moved to Seattle, I had a friend who worked for Microsoft, and I was talking to him about maybe helping my daughter find a job, and he said, it's 50% what you know and 50% who you know. Years later, I ran into him again, and I reminded him of what he said, and he said, well, now I'd say it's about 90% of who you know. So the simple answer is I knew someone who wound up, I met them before they actually started with Valve, but they eventually moved on to Valve. And it was right around the time that they were getting Half-Life 2 going.
Yeah, when was that? Around 2001? It's been the early 2000s, for sure.
Yeah, well, I don't have a firm grip on dates of that, but it was, I think... well, he was living in Seattle too, and I think it was when they were, actually when I met Bill, they were working, it was Bill Van Buren, he was working on like CD-ROMs. You remember, I don't know, you probably don't remember, you're too young, but for a while everyone thought CD-ROMs were going to be the big thing, and then it turned out they weren't, and because the internet came along.
Yeah.
But he wound up working at Valve, and they were working on Half-Life 2. That was the follow-up to their first version, which
Yes.
I think my impression was that it broke some ground in that it had something like a real storyline rather than just bang bang, shoot shoot. And he was doing that, and he approached me. They said they were looking for people, and he thought I might be good. Originally, he thought I might be good for Breen. There's a character I think called Breen.
Yes, Dr. Breen.
And the funny thing is, now if you look at me, I look more like Breen. So that's what happens.
Yes. How was the process of them capturing your face? What did you go through?
Well, there are actually two versions of this. The initial version they did for Half-Life 2 was pretty basic. They would just photograph people, and some of the other people I know were just people they saw in the building they were working on, somebody working for somebody else, and then, oh, that's a good face, we could use him. They, I think they spent some effort finding the right, face, but they used basically just a camera. And they did a bunch of shots with me in different expressions. And then at one point, they drew some lines on my face to kind of, I think they were just reference points. And my understanding from talking to Bill, I mean, this kind of technology was new, to at least to me at the time. And they would create sort of a wireframe model of, say, the head. And then they would take these photographs and kind of wrap the surface, the skin texture and the other features around this wireframe, and then you tweak it a little bit, poke it here and there. and then they would get it to work. So they stretched my head out a bit. I'm not one of these people with a long head, I would say, and the character is a bit, but I'm actually don't look like you would think somebody would look to be the model for G-Man, but I think that worked in their favor because when you see G-Man, there's always something there's something not quite right there. He looks like a person, but there's something isn't quite. There's something odd, and I think it's because they put my kind of somatotype into another somatotype, and that kind of shifted it and gave it a little bit of probably, it's probably a good thing.
Yeah, but it works very well, and that actually falls into the question of Josh. How different was the process when you returned for Half-Life Alyx?
Well, yeah, that was very different. We did the filming at two places. One place was at a studio, like a soundstage in Seattle that I never knew was there. It was just this sort of off in a nook somewhere, but a huge space. And I walked in, and they had a makeup room, and actually one of the face models for one of the other characters in Half-Life 2 did my makeup because that was her profession. The Donna, she's the character, kind of a white coat science lab worker type with long dark hair. So she did my makeup, and I cobbled together sort of G-Man like clothes as best as I could. I'm not really a suit guy, but I found something, and then I walked out, and well, it was great. Donna was putting on my makeup, and then at some point, somebody came in and said, "We're ready for you now." My little short, brief Hollywood moment. So I walked out, and they had sort of some very sophisticated equipment that seemed to be shooting video from several directions at once. And there was sort of a director there, a set director, and I guess an art director, we would call him. We have a photo business, so we would call that person an art director. But they kind of led me through it, and we photographed all that. And it seemed like it was coming, like the cameras were coming from multi dimensions. I think they had prisms and mirrors. It was quite elaborate. And I might be mixing this up with the next shoot, which the part 2 of that day was we went back to Valve, and they had something similar with still cameras, and they were able to create, again, shooting from multiple directions. They right on the spot there, they created a kind of model of my head. And the interesting thing was it had no eyes, so you could look through where my eyes would be to the back of my head, as they were kind of rotating it for me on the screen. It was a little bit of a Blade Runner moment, I suppose, something like that. Yeah, but they used that, and it was. I saw one of the other models there actually down the hall as I was leaving. The woman from the like whatever the next game was, where there's sort of a robot dog and there's a young kind of Asian, kind of Pacific looking.
Vance.
Yeah, she was there, and the model looked exactly like her character. So in that case, they didn't change anything.
So I guess they also brought the old face model for that too.
Yeah, they well, as much as they could. I think they thought, gee, they're all going to die. We better get them before they, while we can, because who knows how long they'll be using this stuff, and they may never use it. I think it was. I mean, I don't know what they've used from that, but I think it was kind of an insurance policy.
I see. And what was your reaction to Valve reaching out to you again after so many years?
Oh, well, I was a little surprised, but not completely surprised. When I was there the first time, I worked a little bit at Valve, but not probably in the way you think. And they somebody was telling me they were starting this kind of streaming thing where they were going to like be kind of the iTunes of games, or I think that's how they described it. And that became Steam. And I remember at the time they were just getting that going, and they had a room full of what looked like the kind of desktop computers you would buy at that time. And they had about, I don't know, 15 or 20 of them in a room with a couple, consumer grade fans running to try to keep them from overheating. And I think that was the beginning of Steam. And so, like, let's see, what was the question? I think I went off the track.
No, you answered the question. The question.
Oh, I did. Oh, good. I've answered
it. Yeah. Actually, there's a
and
question.
I went off the track.
Yeah, just a bit. Tonguebill Master asks, so did Valve scan your face for multiple times for new iteration of Half-Life, perhaps for a game that didn't come out?
Well, they did. Again, the original thing for Half-Life 2, the very simple one, just snap. Yes. And then at some point, they did this much more sophisticated shoot. And the way it was explained to me at the time was they just wanted to have this in their library, so to speak, for whatever they were going to do in the future. And I mean, they didn't really exactly make a Half-Life 3. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct. So far, no Half-Life 3.
I was talking with somebody there about that, and also what I was thinking from Half-Life 1 to Half-Life 2 was a big jump, obviously.
Yes.
But to Half-Life 2 to Half-Life 3, it would be hard to make it something obviously totally new. It would probably look a lot like the first one, except it would look better. I remember one day I was there and somebody was showing me this new kind of thing they were using that was making the light more subtle and more realistic. And it was really nice, but it was like, it's a little bit of finesse. And if you're in that field, you probably loved it. But a lot of people, they might not even, they might barely register. So it's polygons. You can only, the jump from suddenly adding was degree and degree of that is suddenly you need a lot more computer power, but you're not getting such a big payoff. So I think, although I read recently somebody had made a big jump with that, but I don't know.
Well, that's true. When they jumped from Half-Life 2 to Half-Life Alyx, that's back in 2020, I think. Well, that was a huge jump because it was in virtual reality.
Yes.
So that was a huge jump.
Well, I think that's what they were waiting for. They didn't just want to do more of the same. They wanted something that added another element. I don't know. Do you think virtual reality did that enough?
Well, it was certainly a huge jump, and they switched off for a newer engine that they were working on. But we don't know what to expect if Half-Life 3 comes out. Is there going to be such a huge jump as between Half-Life 2 and Half-Life Alyx, or between Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2? We don't know. We just gotta wait.
The sense I got from talking to them, people just here and there, little short conversations, is that they probably wouldn't do something unless they could make a jump. Just to have something that was the same, maybe a little better, but basically the same would not be enough reason to do it. So I thought of that myself, AI is maybe an element where you actually don't know where the game is going to go. No one does. That would make it interesting to me, at least. Like it actually becomes a world, more like our world.
Yeah, you kind of got a point there. The story was pretty much changed a bit because back in 2007 there was a Half-Life 2 Episode 2, which ended with Eli Vance dying, and Half-Life Alyx kind of changed that direction with his daughter saving him, actually. So yeah, we don't know what to expect now and how big of what G-Man will do in Half-Life 3.
No, well, I don't. I don't have really much inside information about those things. Probably you have more than I do. but I'm just looking at it from, from maybe the standpoint of a writer and
Mm-hmm.
also the experience,
Yes.
I mean, what strikes me, I don't play these kind of games. The closest I get is maybe Free Cell, and that's not close at all, is it? But
No.
I think something that would bring in something that could bring an element that it isn't really predictable. The sandbox becomes, at least if not completely open, a lot larger, and where you could
Mm.
spend your life, in there,
Oh yeah.
and you wouldn't be just doing, running along on a rail to an
Oh,
inevitable ending.
like an open world game where you can do whatever
Yeah,
you want.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
That'd be
mi-
cool.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, yeah. I maybe No Man's Sky, was that a little bit what they were trying to do? Do you think?
I don't know. I don't have much knowledge of No Man's Sky, but I'm sure the
I think
people who
that's the
love
name of
that game are gonna comment.
it. Yeah,
And
yeah.
so there's a question from TV Box. So how did you react to Half-Life 2's release? It was a huge game, a lot of copies sold. So what was your reaction to that?
Well, I thought it looked pretty amazing. As you know, they didn't quite meet the original timeline. They originally were going to bring this out sooner, and they had some
Hmm.
issues,
Yes.
which you're probably familiar with. I think
Hmm.
if they had brought it out sooner, it probably would have been unlike anything that was already out there, and it would have made a bigger impression. But um, it did. I think it was still remarkable, and
Oh, it was.
I think it was popular. People liked it. I thought it. I mean, if you look at the first version, it made a huge jump. It doesn't mean the first version was no longer was worthless. The first version is in a way always the best of something because everything else comes from that. So it
Hmm.
has that advantage. But it was the way it looked. I remember the one day they were demonstrating the physics engine, and they had this thing set up with a giant screen and huge speakers, and they were bouncing around. It looked like an oil drum and pieces of concrete, and the way things would move according to what they would hit or how they were hit and the sound they would
Hmm.
make. It was all fitting together. It seemed like it was pretty crazy for me to see that because I didn't know anything about this stuff, and it made sense. I said, yeah, that's going to really be amazing when this thing comes out.
Yeah, for sure. I think that might have been at E3 back in the day, and it's crazy how you remember that kind of
I
stuff.
saw that before that, definitely.
Oh
I
yeah,
saw that.
that's
Yeah, and it was while I
amazing.
was kind of doing some work there. I used to build some things for them.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Well, I again because of Bill, I got some work over there. A lot of what I did, I put up a lot of whiteboards. The one essential uh, piece of technology that everybody there used were whiteboards. Everybody had them. Everybody used them. And I put up a lot of those, and the people were constantly moving from one office to the next. So I then take them down and put them up. They all wanted, different size, different place. So I did a lot of that, and then uh, I built this big platform. They had the saltwater aquarium with these two creatures. They're called chambered nautiluses. They look like a big curly shell, but with tentacles sticking out of it and big eyes. They look like a face with tentacles swimming along with a head with no body. They're very amazing. And they had these in a aquarium that poked out of the wall, but behind the wall there were these giant tanks that ran all this stuff to keep the water good. And I had to build a
Mm.
platform like that. And then I was in there building it, and some guy came in with a big hand truck full of soda and was crashing around. And I said, if this guy crashes into these tanks, it's going to be a disaster. So I talked them into building a fence around it. So
Yeah,
I built
that's
that,
cool.
and then they asked me to build an art board. So in a room, imagine it's basically a big bulletin board, but they wanted it a certain size and huge thing, and painted that sort of drab kind of military green. And I built that. And then there was a guy named Bay Rate. He started working for them. And he had designed the face for Gollum in Lord of the Rings, the films. And he wanted some storyboards. I don't know if you're familiar with the filmmaking business, but they often, when they make a film, they do these little panels, like a comic book almost.
Yes.
And he wanted them that could be moved around. I think they were like 8 feet long and about, I don't know, 8 feet, let's see, 2.5 meters, 2.3 meters, whatever that would be, and about a third of a meter high, 18 inches. And I built 3 of those, and they were very light and portable, and you could move them around and put them in a line or put them on top of each other, and then you would pin the illustrations on there. So I built stuff like that for them too.
That's very interesting. So what exactly do you do in life? Because I'm sure most of the fans and people know you as the face behind G-Man, but what do you do?
Well, for many, many years, I was a teacher of the Alexander technique, and it's kind of like being a performance coach. And I worked a lot with performers, but also, I mean, really anybody, but I did do a lot of work with performers. Through that, I got a job with a man named Robert Fripp, and Robert Fripp is a musician, composer, guitar player. He started with a group called King Crimson in, part of the 60s things, but they still go on tour, and they're not really a dinosaur band. They do new stuff as well. Kind of, they're what had been called progressive rock. Robert doesn't like to call it that anymore. Robert Fripp, you can look him up. But he started doing these courses that he called Guitar Craft, and basically they brought me on board to help people, because it was playing any kind of instrument is physically very demanding, and then you have the whole aspect of performing, which is another thing altogether. I knew people that could play well. They get up in front of an audience and they would just fall apart. So I would help them with that. I would help them with solving little problems they were having that was causing aches and pains, or not having the ability to do what they needed to do. And I also did some courses in kind of creativity, inspiration, how to get away from habits that might be getting in the way of performance and creativity and inspiration. So I did that a lot. And then I left that at a certain point, and I now kind of work for my wife. My wife is a photographer, Ingrid Papa Sheldon, Pape. My wife's from Germany. And so we have a photo business here just north of Seattle.
Yeah, well, I heard you lived in New England, and then you moved to the US, and then back to New England, and it's good to hear all that, actually.
Yeah, I lived in England for 5 years. I lived in Germany for about 5 years. I really one of the things I enjoyed about Guitarcraft was we do courses all over the world, so I got to travel a lot, and that was really good for me. I also tried some writing. I wrote a novel. It's still on Amazon.
Yes, I believe it's Far from the Sea We Know. Is it
That's
not?
it. Yeah, and I'm working on another one, a shorter one, and I'm also working on some nonfiction stuff, which is related to my time in Guitarcraft. It's basically a book on a very specific way to share experience, with the idea that experience without interpretation, if we accept it as simply being a witness to it, can change our lives. How's that? Okay. But that'll be out probably by the end of this year.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll stay excited for that. I'll include your book, Far from the Sea We Know, in the description, so you guys can check it out. And if you're a big book reader or something, you can read it.
Yeah.
So there's the next question. Have you ever been considered to do G-Man's voice?
Oh no, I thought about trying to learn that once, but is it Michael Shapiro?
Yeah, it is him.
Yeah, I think he's kind of got that. I don't think they would need me.
Well,
Maybe
yeah.
do I sound anything like G-Man to you?
Well, you could. I mean, he doesn't really speak that way. He is kind of sinister and
Yeah, yeah. He sort of has a bit of a slithery quality, doesn't he?
yeah. Well, he's an actor, so.
Yeah.
Have you played any of the Half-Life games? Asks Broken.
No, I haven't. If I had been born later in life, if that's the way to put it, I probably would have got totally into all of that stuff. But I had just gone through a lot of things by the time games came around, and it just wasn't something I was going to do. I'm not against them. I think it's really interesting, and some people criticize computer games, but in a lot of ways, it's better than watching a movie or something because you are taking part in it in some way.
Yes, it's more active.
And I think especially with these more sophisticated games where there is kind of a story and there is some
Yeah.
unpredictability. And I had my best friend, my oldest friend, since this, kindergarten or something. He got really into Skyrim or something like that. Skyrim? Is that a
Yeah,
game?
yeah, that game exists. Yeah.
Yeah, he got, or I think there was another game related to it, and he got totally into that, and we used to talk about it, and I can see how you can do it. It wasn't something I needed to do. I found other things to do, and
Yeah.
um, but I think it's fine. I think they get too much criticism in a way. And my guess is they will become more sophisticated and very immersive and, the metaverse and all that stuff. And it's
For
going to be
sure.
hard to tell when our lives from our other lives, we're entering some strange future, I think, whether we want to or not.
It's impressive. It's very impressive. And actually, we have a
Mm.
question from Joe. Do you think
Hmm.
you could do a G-Man voice impression if I play you a clip? If you could do a short line,
Okay,
I'll play it.
I'll try.
Dr. Freeman.
What is he even saying? But I should explain, I have a severe to profound hearing loss.
Oh, he is
So
saying Dr. Freeman.
the last time I tried something like this, I got hoarse. Dr. Freeman. Dr. Freeman. That's the best I can do.
It's not too bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
He must have, if that's the way he spoke, that must have been a little hard on his voice. Do you think they modulated it after the fact? Manipulated it a bit to add that kind of raspy
I
burr into it?
don't know. It's not that raspy actually. It's just like
Maybe it's just the way I'm hearing it.
perhaps, but that some originality is not a bad thing, and you
Yeah.
showed originality, so that's good. And the next
Okay.
question from Stefano Nemo: have you ever met Michael Shapiro? G-Man's voice.
No, no, I've never met any of the voice actors. I guess it's, when you see the finished product, you kind of picture it all just happening almost as if it's playing out live. But the reality is they do all the little parts and bits and pieces in some cases over years. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's common, just not to see anybody else or meet anyone else.
Oh
I
yeah.
think the second big major session that I was telling you about with they had a lot of people. They were doing them all together, so they had, I think, other people that I did see the woman who plays Alex. But I didn't talk to anybody except for Donna, who plays. I think her character's in the lab with. I remember she's wearing a white lab coat. Like, who would that be?
Was that when was that? 2019, around that time?
Well, that was in Half-Life 2.
Oh, Half-Life 2. Well, that's a good question. It might have been Dr. Mossman, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, I know Donna, but that's the only other one I met that I know of.
Yeah. The next question from Red Focus. So, what do you think about G-Man? What do you know about the G-Man? What is your opinion on G-Man?
Well, I'm kind of an intuitive person, so sometimes without really knowing anything, I seem to know something. It doesn't mean it's true, however. I think my own sense of him is that he does have some kind of um, either a human origin or some kind of human intersection. So there's a certain humanity there, but it's also connected out to something that is really not human.
Yeah.
And but or it's possible that it's been through so many configurations, and some people even mention time travel, all that kind of stuff, that he's he's kind of looked into the abyss and then maybe a little deeper, and
Mm.
he's only partly in the world of humans.
Yeah, it's all mystery that surrounds G-Man and his character.
Yeah. I know sometimes writers, when they create a character, like, they do have kind of a whole story, a backstory, and so they might know. And it's also possible, especially because G-Man was based on the first game when things were much less sophisticated, that it may not have been important in that first game to actually have much of a backstory. They just knew he was this guy that appears now and then and either causes trouble or sometimes might even help,
Mm.
and that was enough. So it could be that if there is any uh, history or any origin or any explanation, it might be that it's evolving with the people who created the game and who are creating the game. I think some of the people in Valve have moved on. So it could be like a lot of fictional characters. The things change, and they will often
Certainly.
kind of retroactively try to come up with a story that fits in with if you do a good job at it, you would retroactively come up with something that fits perfectly and wouldn't have any irretrievable contradictions, if you can put it that way. Something that would make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, would you believe me if I told you that people are still playing both Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2?
Oh, I would believe that. Yeah, I would, because these things have something, and although stuff can become more sophisticated and technically in some ways better, that doesn't necessarily always mean it's more enjoyable. And there's
Hmm.
something like there's always something magical about the first version, the original version,
Yeah, even
because
Zach was a huge
because none
fan.
of that stuff existed, and then suddenly it did. Well, not suddenly, people worked on it, but
Yeah.
that will have something uh, that you can't ever completely duplicate again. And then yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, people are still playing these games. In fact, modding is an option. Modding
Yes.
means that they can create their own stories and campaigns, and that's, I think, still great that people are still making these mods even to this day.
Yeah, I think that's again, that shows that there can be a creative aspect for players. Uh,
Yes.
in a lot of ways, as I said, it's a lot more engaging, and the players can be more active than, say, watching a movie or a TV show. They're just slouched on a couch. So I think I think at some point games could become as sophisticated as the most sophisticated films in terms of plot and story and interactions and subtleties and all of the things that you might like about a very good film, and I would and then go beyond that, where it's really more open ended, more possibilities. I'm sure that's coming.
Well, for sure. I mean, a lot of games, the newer games, already have like motion capture in them, which basically has the actors dress up in some sort of a suit, and that
Hmm.
tracks their motion and
Hmm.
basically acting out the scenes, and that's going to be put in the game. So it's almost like film production in a way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a big, they're getting closer together. I once asked somebody over there, why haven't they made a Half-Life movie? And he said, well, here's the deal that you get. They say, we'll buy the rights to Half-Life from you. We'll be able to do whatever we want with it, and you will have no say in it whatsoever, and you won't even get that much money for it. But think of the exposure.
For sure, for sure.
So, yeah.
It'd also be great if we got a Half-Life 3. Sorry for interrupting you.
No, no, not at all.
So yeah, Half-Life 3 is like the next thing next to a movie is what we'd like.
Is there any indication they're working on something like that?
The ending of the new Half-Life indicates that there should be a
Oh,
continuation.
well, I know also I didn't talk a lot with Gabe Newell, but I briefly met him. I actually put up part of his knife collection because he's a collector of knives on his wall in his office there when
Oh
it was over
wow.
in Bellevue. Uh, but this isn't just a commercial enterprise. Those
Yeah.
guys, they really care about it, and
Yeah.
what they don't want to do is just roll something out because there's a market for it. I think Half-Life has a special place for them. I mean, they do other things, obviously, but it has and if they do something again, it's going to be. I think it will be a jump,
Oh, for
and that
sure.
and I hope they do. It'd be great if they did.
Yeah, it would be great. Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, a question from Sifo: have you ever been stopped in public because people recognized you as G-Man?
Not really. Somebody at Valve asked for my autograph. They had all these posters. They came out with these posters of some of the characters. They had a poster of G-Man, so
Uh
somebody
huh.
approached me and asked me if I was autograph the poster. That was my one and only autograph. I did sometimes when I'm at some kind of event like a party or a dinner. Somebody introduces me. Oh, there's this guy. He was the, and then people go, oh, and then they look at me.
Well, yeah, you look like the G-Man still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe
Like,
his grandfather.
oh, come on. I mean, you look like a G-Man with a beard, obviously, but like
Yeah.
cooler, you know.
It's a disguise. I'm hiding in plain sight.
Yeah.
Maybe Breen is G-Man.
Uh,
That would
uh,
make sense.
well, I don't know. I don't think so. But I mean, you do resemble Dr. Breen,
But
right?
see, if he's playing Dr. Breen, he's playing a role. He's acting like that character needs to act like to create the conditions where other things could take place. Because I mean, I'm just making all this up, obviously, but I think the thing about G-Man that I got from the little interaction I had was that he's probably the only one in of all the characters, all the aliens, whatever, head crabs, strange Vorgons, whatever they're called, with the big suits. He's probably the only one that really understands what's going on. Everyone
Yeah.
else are just players in his story. I That's a little grandiose, maybe, but I'm probably biased, aren't I?
Well, Half-Life 2, to my understanding, G-Man placed us into that city where Dr. Breen is the administrator, with that kind of
Yes,
recurring, like, we have to stop this guy because he might be a
yes,
problem, you know.
yes,
So I don't think the possibility of Dr. Breen is G-Man or vice versa, but who knows? Because, it's all
yes.
fiction.
Well,
So,
it makes no sense except it would fit in with what you might say G-Man's personality to do something like that. It's
yeah.
kind of you create a crisis so the crisis can be solved, and solving the crisis transforms the person who solves it into something else, and that's what's really needed.
Yeah, it's always that he uses Dr. Gordon Freeman for his own advantages. Obviously, that's why he
Yeah.
keeps him alive.
Yes.
Um, so I really wonder what Half-Life 3 will bring us, because as I said before, Half-Life Alex ended with a different ending, uh, even more interesting, which I don't really want to bother you with because I know you're probably not aware of all that,
Hmm.
and it would be a long story. Um, but let's move on to the next question from Bruner. So, are you aware of the Source Filmmaker and Gary Smart communities? Those programs allow fans of Half-Life to manipulate the face of G-Man as well as many other Valve characters into absolutely bizarre and disturbing expressions. So, what's your opinion on that? Have you seen any animations or anything like that with?
Well, I have seen some of those. It seems to be, a natural human tendency. You see a poster, you draw a mustache on it. It's just people have
Yeah,
been doing this forever. Uh, it's uh, obviously these are more sophisticated. I don't see anything. It doesn't bother me that people do that.
mm,
It's I mean, people are going to do things, and some of them will probably be disturbing or in bad taste, and some of them might be even horrible. But I can't stop that, or I mean, it's trying to stop that would probably do more harm than good if you think about it. So,
oh yeah.
yeah.
Just
Um,
the fact that it's your face pretty much that they're using. So what is your
well, it
reaction
is
to
and it
that?
isn't. They changed me enough so I see myself when I look at, in Half-Life 2, the Half-Life 2 version. I see a bit of myself in there, but um, I'm in a sense I'm not exactly an actor, but I did something like that, and then what I did was then turned into something else. But I'm not the character.
Yeah.
An actor can play a homicidal maniac, or they can play the kindly priest in the village, or they might be both. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, but the actor is not those people.
Yeah.
And so I don't see that they're doing that to me.
Well, you do have a point, and that pretty much answers the question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you play any instruments?
Oh, when I was in high school, I played guitar, but I am a little dyslexic, and I
Oh,
could never get through one whole song somehow. So at some point, I gave that up. But I really enjoyed. I was with Guitarcraft about 25 years actively. I still have a connection there, and I really enjoyed being part of that world. I'd sometimes go on tours and things. So we did some of that, and we'd get performances together. It's um, I admire people that can perform live. It's really quite an incredible thing to be able to do that. But I
yeah.
also admire. I've been on the periphery of some recording sessions, and I admire people that can work and the skills they have to get something really amazing, some amazing sound stuff. It's.
Yeah.
I'm glad there are. I actually knew the guy that did a lot of the sound for Valve.
Haley Bailey wasn't that?
Well, I knew a guy named Tobin Buttram. I don't know if he was the main guy or not, but he did a lot with them.
Hmm.
Tobin Buttram, and he had been involved in Guitarcraft.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. Well, all right, man. Frank, thank you so much for joining me on the
Oh,
VŌC Podcast. Is there anything you'd like to tell the fans of G-Man and Half-Life? Any special message? Anything?
the right man at the wrong time can make all the difference.
Yeah, exactly. And that's completely right. Um, I'm so glad that you've seen my comment under your YouTube video, and that you were interested in coming on here and chat about Half-Life. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm just very flattered and thankful.
Well, you've done a great job at interviewing, at running this, Ronald. You really have, and the pleasure is all mine, as they say, and thanks.
Well,
thank you.
Well, hopefully I'll have you back sometime soon, and we can talk about Half-Life 3.
Okay. I hope that happens. Yeah, that would be wonderful.